Orlando. Good morning. Dobre rano, Patrick. Hello, Al. Nice to see you. Carlsbad, California. Virginia, back in Virginia. Hi, Sarah. Dobre rano from San Francisco, Northern California. Therese, good morning. Ohio, New York, Wisconsin. Oh, I missed that. Oh, okay. Zoom user. Grandpa's name was Peter Kuzmishin. New York, California, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Texas, Portland, Oregon, Maine, Central California, San Diego, DC, Ohio, Gainesville, Florida. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing where you're joining us from. Once again, we took a little break. It's wonderful to be connected with all of you today for today's webinar. So the Sunday webinar series that we have with Global Slovakia. As you know, we have our very special guest. He's a recurring featured VIP guest on our Global Slovakia series. He's a Slavic mythology expert. His name is Peter Weleslaw Kuzmishin. And he is going to be taking you through the rites of passages that took place during this part of year on this geography. So present-day Slovakia, we're going to look into the ancient rituals of our predecessors, the ancient Slavs, particularly looking at the harvest period and the various gratitude ceremonies they did to thank the gods, but also the ancestors for the abundance that the earth or nature provided for them. So as you know, Global Slovakia is a non-for-profit. These webinars are free. You can support us and help keep them free by either sending us a donation. We'll provide links at the end of this, or by purchasing one of our courses on our Global Slovakia Online Academy. As part of today's webinar, we're featuring 2 courses. If we could go to that slide. Yes, very exciting. We're offering 2 courses at 20% off. I think it's going to be valid today and tomorrow. This code, the code for the discount is October, so the new month that we're in. And the 2 courses that we're offering at a discount are Slavic mythology, which is a great introduction into the spiritual belief system of our ancestors. It introduces you to the pantheon of the gods that they revered, but also a lot of the practices that they took part in seasonally at different parts of the year. And then the next course that we have is actually one of my favorites. It's one that we produce every month. It's called Mystery and Nostalgia. Now, this is really fascinating because it looks at medieval Slovakia. So we look at the ruling families, explicitly, we look at 12 clans that once ruled this region for sometimes hundreds, if not nearly 1,000 years. So you get introduced to those families that were really the power players in this region, as well as we look at the folk craft. So not everything that what made up this northern Hungary, present-day Slovakia, came from the top down, but obviously it also came from the bottom up. So we look at the folk culture of the people and the various creations they did. A lot of it was with their own creativity, their own ingenuity, which truly made exceptional Slovak craft. And lastly, we look at a lot of the unsolved mysteries that come from this region. Most recently, stories like the death of Milan Rastislav Štefanik, or the later death, more recent death of Alexander Dubček. But we also look at the deaths, that unsolved mysteries that go back to the Middle Ages, that are truly fascinating, often tied with these very powerful families. So if you want to learn more about medieval Slovakia, get Mystery and Nostalgia. If you want to learn more about your predecessors, the ancient Slavs, get Slavic mythology. And now we're going to dive into the presentation with Mr. Weleslaw. So we hand it over to you.
So just a quick hello from me before we begin. Wonderful to see you all again. If you are not acquainted with Weleslaw, let me introduce him very briefly. As Zana said, he's an expert and a practitioner actually of the native Slavic faith. He's a published author who has 3 books out so far in Slovak. He's also founder of the Sacred Grove of the Native Faith that kind of keeps these rituals, traditions, ceremonies, and the way of life alive in the 21st century. So welcome, Weleslaw.
Nope.
Wonderful to have you here again. We actually met last week, so we're increasing our frequency of meetings. So Weleslaw, for those of you that don't know, he'll present his presentation in Slovak, and I'll be translating it into English. I would also like to ask you all to keep yourselves muted throughout the presentation, and then you will have an opportunity to ask questions at the end of it. So, Weleslaw, je to vaše.
Thank you. Ďakujem za predstavenie. Ešte by som dodal tú poslednú vec, že vďaka vám vlastne momentálne sa so mnou môžu ľudia stretnúť aj na facebookovej stránke Slovanské rituály.
So hello everyone, it's an honor to be here. Weleslaw would also like to sort of introduce another platform where you can meet him, which is a Facebook page that's administered by Global Slovakia also. It's called Slavic Rituals, and he's one of the contributors there. So if you'd like to get more of his content in English, that's one of the places to head to.
Vlastne v dnešnej prednáške, ako bolo povedané, budeme sa venovať obdobiu vlastne od letného slnovratu, o ktorom sme si rozprávali minule, môžeme povedať po terajšok, po túto dobu, hoci už vlastne trošku v tejto dobe meškáme, ale to dobre.
So last time we had Weleslaw on the webinar was in the summer, or at the beginning of summer, so we discussed our summer solstice, and today we'll backtrack a little bit and we will cover the period from summer solstice escalating with the harvest season and kind of ending more or less these days. So we will be looking back at the months past.
Toto obdobie často je nazývané aj takým babím letom. Skúsme preložiť. Toto obdobie je často nazývané aj babím letom.
So in Slovakia, this part of year, so that's the kind of very tail end of summer and the beginning of autumn, is called babie leto, or like an old lady's summer. We can say it's Indian summer. We have a special expression for it that Weleslaw is going to explain to you in a moment.
Ale skoro ako sa k tomu dostaneme, začneme tam, kde sme prestali, a to pri oslave letného slnovratu, ktorý vlastne na Slovensku alebo v tomto regióne medzi Slovanmi mal veľký význam, ale aj niekoľko názvov ako Dní Kupala, Vajano a môžeme sa určite stretnúť aj s ďalšími. Ten rituál, ten hlavný sme si popísali už v minulom webinári. Vlastne po tomto veľkom dni potom prichádza v takej periodicite 3, 7, 9, 13 dní prichádzajú také kvázi menšie oslavy, ktoré sú zasvetené ďalším bohom.
Okay, so we're picking up this presentation where we left off last time. So at summer solstice, we covered summer solstice in length, in detail a few months ago. So just a brief reminder, this was one of the greatest celebrations and gatherings of the old Slavs. That lasted several days. It was not just a one-day event, and that has several names, even in Slovakia, but also across the Slavic world. So it's called the Night of Kupala, Kupala being the summer representation of the sun god. It's also called Vajana. And once these festivities were over, 3, 7, 9, 13 days after followed kind of shorter, smaller celebrations and rituals that were dedicated to different deities. Weleslaw just popped out because he, as well as presenting his work and life to you, he's looking after 3 small children all by himself tonight. So have a little patience with him. If we're lucky, he might bring them along. And I will use the opportunity to allow those that are joining us later in.
Sorry. Visit. Okay. So in these days, this celebration continue, ale môžeme toho povedať po slovensky. V týchto nasledujúcich dňoch oslavy boli zasvetené božstvám ako Kovladovi a Rune, božstvám podzemia.
So some of these rituals were dedicated to the deities of the world and the soil. So that's Kovlad and Runa.
Ale rovnako aj takým božstvám, ako je Polevik a Kurent, ktorí mali na starosti práve stromy, polia, lúky, sady.
But people also remembered deities such as Polevik and Kurent, who were the gods of the fields, the pastures, the trees.
A práve Kovlad a Runa mali, dá sa povedať, tú čarovnú moc v tomto období, kedy sa tradovalo, že rastliny získavajú silnejšiu čarodejnú moc a tento čas práve tým, že Kovlada a Runa ich požehnáva, získavajú ľudia možnosť nadobudnúť rôzne čarodejné síly, a to od porozumenia z viacej reči, až keď si vložili paprať do topánky, tak moc neviditeľnosti.
So back to the first deities that we mentioned, Kovlad and Runa, the gods of the lived under the surface of the soil, so not the underworld, but literally under the surface of the ground. They were believed to bless and endow plants with magical properties at this time of year. So healing plants and other plants were said to be the strongest at this time of the day in terms of their healing potential, but also when it comes to their magic. So for instance, people believed that certain plants could sort of help them to acquire certain superpowers, such as understanding the animal speech, or when you put fern into your shoe, it was said that you would sort of learn the art and the craft of being invisible.
A vlastne v tomto období zároveň vrcholia prosby o dobrú úrodu, lebo čas žatvy sa už blíži a vlastne tieto následujúce poslnovratné obrady už predznamenávajú práve ten blížiaci sa zber nie len obilia, ale aj blížiacej sa jesene a tým pádom ovocia a zeleniny. A ďakuje sa hlavne Mokoši, Velesovi, ale podobne aj Polevikovi a Kurentovi, ktorých sme spomínali.
So the post-solstice activities are centered around the harvest, which is kind of impeding its coming at that time of year. So there are sort of prayers and ceremonies and rituals enacted to safeguard a good harvest of crops, but also of fruit and vegetables. And the deities that are connected to that are evoked and thanked to at this time of year. So that would be Mokosh, the goddess of the earth and life, and Veles, the god of the underworld, the god who was said to bring sort of animal husbandry and agriculture to humankind, as well as these other smaller deities that we already mentioned.
No, a vlastne po príchode kresťanstva celý ten komplex od slnovratu až vlastne po tú skorú jeseň, povedzme, všetky tieto obrady ako keby boli splynuli v rámci toho, čo sa zachovalo do dnešných dní, hlavne v slávnosti pálenia jánskych ohňov, prípadne petrášskych ohňov. Čiže pálení vatier počas Jána alebo počas sviatku Petra.
So here on the slide you can see depictions of some of the deities from one of Weleslav's books. So we have Runa and Kovlad on the left, and then we have the other deities on the right. So you might wonder, after the arrival of Christianity, what happened. So when this new religion and faith was introduced to Central Europe and to Slovakia, these ancient traditions that kind of followed one after another in a procession of set events and ceremonies practiced for centuries, this was kind of brought together and squished into a couple of days. So after the arrival and the establishment of Christianity, people no longer kind of did all the summer equinox rituals or the consequent agricultural rituals, but they gathered on St. John's night. So that's June 24th, I believe, or then later on at the end of June on the day of St. Peter and St. Paul, to continue the ancient practice in a way to make fires, to make bonfires as a remembrance of the old ancient days.
Práve vlastne do toho sviatku svätého Petra Pavla bola už snaha hospodárov zožať obilie, lebo práve po tomto období nasleduje taký zlom v prírode, kedy sa mení počasie a napriek tomu, že ešte chvíľu môže byť teplo, už mohla byť znehodnotiť sa. A práve ten sviatok svätého Petra je, kedy sa zapálili ešte naposledy veľké vatry a potom sa už muselo ísť do práce, lebo už prichádzali prírodné zmeny.
So although once Christianity set in, those rituals were no longer kind of explicitly about all these things that we just discussed, but they were still connected to agriculture and to rural life, as most of our predecessors and most of inhabitants of modern day Slovakia were farmers, so they lived off the land. The St. Peter's and Paul's days that falls on June 29th, that was kind of the last opportunity for people to gather and celebrate, to make those bonfires and to be together, because after that harvest really comes in, and they'll have to work hard in the weeks and months to come to harvest everything, to protect what they grew from bad weather, because it's at the end of June, that's kind of the breaking point in weather patterns. So it's still nice and sunny and everything, but you never know when rains and storms come in. And if you have harvested your grains and you're leaving them outside in the field to dry, if they get wet, if this gets wet, then your harvest is ruined. You can no longer use these grains to produce bread. So that came at huge cost for the family and for the community. So that's why people, after that day, June the 29th, really dedicated all their time and energy, and they focused on getting the fruits of their labor in.
Žatevné práce neboli len zožať obilie z poľa, ale taktiež ho vymlátiť, získať z neho zrno, vlastne oddeliť to, čo je potrebné pre mletie múky, ale ani tá slama a všetok ten materiál zvyšný tiež neprichádzal ako názmar, on tiež musel byť nejako dobre uskladnený, aby sa počas zimy vlastne tá slama používala na podstielku pre zvieratá a tak ďalej. Ale každá žatva sa začínala takou hostinou.
So here we come to the harvest. It's not just about getting whatever you are tending to for months from the fields and from the gardens in the side. It's also about processing the harvest. So the immediate getting it in, it's just the first step. Then comes in sort of threshing of the grains. The process during which sort of the grains, the seeds were separated from all the other matter. The seeds were then taken, they would be milled and made into flour, whereas the other stuff would be used for hay, which would be put aside, and that would serve as underlayer for livestock during the autumnal and winter months. So nothing was wasted and everything was properly used. And the harvest started with a celebration, with festivity that until today in Slovakia is called the Hody, or Hodová slávnosť. Nie? Ešte nie?
Nie, tá hostina, hoci sa volala Hody, ale to s tými hodmi, ktoré sú úplne potom až na záver, lebo sú potom... To bola len taká malá slávnosť, ktorá začínala každú žatvu. A volala sa Hody tiež z hodou okolností, ako tie hody, ktoré máme až hlboko v jeseni, ktoré máme, my sme mali dnes napríklad doma, piekli sme kačku. Takže tiež sme hodovali, ale to nie sú, je tam ten slovičko to isté, ale tieto hody na začiatku, to je len taký obrad, jednoduchý obrad jedla, kedy sa vlastne všetci tí ľudia, ktorí prichádzajú, nemuseli, lebo rodina nemusela stíhať v danom čase zožať všetko. Preto prichádzali ľudia aj zo susedných dedín, alebo dokonca z iných okresov, kde už žatva možno skončila, alebo ešte len by mala prísť. Tak vlastne všetci sa zišli na nejakom statku, kde sa začínala žatva a urobili sa hody, ako napiekol sa chlieb, a aby ľudia mali ten pocit, aby sa dobre najedli, aby mohli pracovať.
So correction on my side. So it is called Hody, which means a feast in Slovak, but it's a small kind of ritual. It's a small gathering that precedes the harvest. The big stuff comes after. So this small feast really served the purpose of getting people together, because in different regions of Slovakia, harvest would take place at slightly different time of summer. So people would come from neighboring villages or even from other regions where harvest had already finished or has not started yet. And they would sort of come together to help one another to harvest the fields quickly and efficiently. And for that, this little feast was held so that people would kind of bond, but would also be fed and have enough energy to face the task at hand.
Ľudia sa vlastne stretali už v predvečer alebo v preddeň začatia žatvy, kedy vlastne bol usporiadané tie hody, pohostenie pre tých všetkých žatevníkov. Často počas toho dňa práve ešte bol čas na návštevu svetohája, na pomodlenie sa a vlastne až na druhý deň ráno začína samotná žatva, kedy hlavný žnec alebo často gazda vlastne ide na čele toho sprievodu od gazdovstva na pole, kde vlastne kde znovu je prednesená modlitba k božstvám a ako Mokoš, Veles, Kúren, Polevik a väčšinu tých agrárnych božstiev. Neskôr v nástupe kresťanstva pravda, že je to modlitba k Bohu, ku Kristu a následne po tejto modlitbe sú vodou obliaté kosy, často aj samotný hlavný kosec a vlastne začína sa samotná žatva.
So all the people who would participate in the harvesting of the field would gather the night before the harvest would actually take place. So this would give people time to also visit the sacred grove, to make a prayer, to ask for protection. And the harvest itself would start the next day when everybody would go out into the field or fields that were to be harvested, and the procession would be headed by the men of the house. This is where again prayers were offered, and all the equipment, so the sickles and the scythes, would be sprinkled with water. So they were blessed as these tools that were to harvest the goodness. And Weleslaw said that often also the main kind of the leader of the harvest activities in that field would also be ritually blessed with water. After the arrival of Christianity, the kind of the procedure that was so ingrained in the culture and in the people continued, but the prayers offered were no longer aimed at the goddess Mokosh or god Veles or these other rural and farm deities and spiritual beings, but rather at God and Jesus Christ.
Ale v zásade sa nič nezmenilo. Rituály boli znovu tie isté vykonané. A vlastne to ostalo až do dnešného.
But the essence of it didn't really change, so what people did kind of continued uninterrupted through this ancient times, through the Middle Ages until today, when we still witness and can experience these harvest activities and celebrations in action.
Čo sa týka žatvy, vlastne počas žatvy sa veľa spievalo, vlastne čo pomáhalo práci, aj pri spracovaní. Často ľudia jednoducho pri práci spievali, čo už dnes nie je také obyčajné. Vlastne po ukončení žatvy hovoríme o žatve ako o zbere obilia. Ešte stále to nie je ukončenie toho času, kedy zo zeme dostávame všetku úrodu, lebo vlastne následovali dni, kedy sa zbieralo ovocie zo sadov, zelenina zo zeme, ale taktiež sú to časy, kedy prichádzajú dni vinobrania a spracovania vína. Čiže všetky tie poľnohospodárske práce naďalej pokračujú, ale ako náhle je obilie, to hlavné, čo človeka tedajšieho držalo pri živote, chlieb, ukončené, tak sa zvykli robiť také dožinkové slávnosti.
So, during the work, when in the fields and engaging in the laborious labor that had to be done very fast, people would sing, and they would sing together because that was said to kind of attract and please and cheer up all the field and rural deities and spiritual beings, so they would enable the process. Unfortunately, that merriment merrymaking whilst working is not so common anymore. But back to the harvest. So harvesting grains was not the only activity of taking the produce of the fields and of the gardens, but it was the most important one. So that was something, cereal and bread was something that on which the kind of the fate and destiny of the family and the community depended. After that would come a season of and days of picking fruits, of harvesting vegetables, of picking grapes and processing them into wine. But once that most important thing was in, the grains, it was safe under the roof, that's when people would have another feast, another celebration that is called dožinky.
K tomu chlebu obilie nebolo len určené len pre pečenie chleba, ale v tej dobe sa často jedli aj obilné kaše, ktoré boli skutočne základom vtedajšej stravy. Chlieb bol Boží dar. To nebolo až také common. Chlieb bol základ síce, ale nebolo to také, že bolo ho brutálne dostatok. Ľudia väčšinou jedli kaše, lebo tie boli sítejšie, rýchlejšie sa dali zjesť. Ale to len tak na okraj toho chleba, ale späť do žinka. Ale toto treba preložiť, lebo...
Although the bread was at the core of the culture, it was a gift from God. It was a sacred thing. The grains that were harvested were not just used to make bread. In fact, bread was not that common. It was not something that you would have every day in abundance. It truly was special. The grains would be used to make porridges. That was the main sustenance of these people.
V každom prípade počas dožinkov sa práve chlieb piekol ako veľký chlieb, slávnostný chlieb a výnimočný bol práve tým, že bol upečený z múky, ktorá bola umletá z prvého obilia, ktoré bolo zožaté. Čiže počas žatvy sa vyslovene tie prvé zákosy vlastne sa zbierali, vymlátili sa ako prvé úplne osobitne a vymlela sa z nich múka. Ako potom žatva nasledovala, vlastne ten proces z tej múky sa urobil a z tejto múky sa napiekol slávnostný chlieb, prípadne koláče nejaké.
Since we are discussing bread was kind of a special thing and a centerpiece of these dožinky celebrations, and it was no ordinary bread. The bread that was baked on this occasion was prepared from the first flour of the grains that were first harvested, taken off the fields. So this would be taken in, would be threshed, it would be milled, turned into flour that was then used to bake the bread or the cakes for the dožinky.
Vlastne tu je vidno taký celosvetový čarodejný princíp prvého, ako sa to volá, v čarodejníctve, keď vlastne využívame silu niečoho, čo je prvé, prvorodený syn. Keď ho obetujeme, tak dostaneme všetko možné. Hej. Prvé ovocie, jednoducho všetko, čo bolo prvé, má ako keby tú najväčšiu silu a tým pádom aj obetovaním toho vieme vlastne nadobudnúť práve tú čarodejnú moc.
So this bread or cakes were baked from the first flour on this occasion, not for fun. There was a meaning and a purpose behind it that is common to nature-based faiths across the world. And it's the principle or the magical principle of the first, when the first son or the first things, first crops harvested, are believed to hold special power and special potency. And by kind of offering that, baking the bread and the cakes from that amplifies this power of the first. So that's the magical principle of the first that you find, across stories, legends, but also, in other religious traditions where we often talk about the first son or sacrificing the first son, and so on and so forth.
Dobre, a tu sa vlastne dostávame k... Dožinky mali mnoho vlastných takých v rámci regiónu rôznych rituálov a rôzne spevy a rôzne veci, ale vlastne všetko to smerovalo k tomu, že sa ďakovalo práve za tú zdarenú úrodu a zároveň ešte tam bola stále tá prosba, tá čarodejná prosba toho, že ešte stále Matka Zem, vieš nám dať veľa toho, čo nás môže spraviť živý, čo nás bude živiť. Takže ešte stále prosíme a ďakujeme za to, čo sme dostali a prosíme, aby ešte tá celá úroda nám prišla k prospechu.
So although Dožinky takes the rituals and the ceremonies around it, they differ from region to region, the principle remains the same. And that's that of giving thanks for what was already harvested, and also asking for the abundance of that which was going to be harvested in the weeks and the months to come.
No a vlastne potom po tých dožinkoch prichádza taký veľký sviatok Perúna, kedy, to je tak 1. august zvyčajne, zhruba tak, kedy ten sviatok je spojený s Perúnom, ale popravde sa vzýva a volá sa ako sviatok Dolie alebo Doduly. Je to vlastne táto bohyňa, je to bohyňa šťastia a práve táto bohyňa šťastia je často považovaná za družku Perúna. A preto vlastne je to spojený sviatok, hovorí sa, že Perúna, ale vlastne základom toho sviatku je práve jeho družka, skrz ktorú ľudia žiadajú Perúna, aby na rozpálenú zem, ktorá je bez obilia, čiže je holá a keď na ňu svieti slnko, tak ju o mnoho viac vysušuje a práve preto naši predkovia už vtedy vedeli, že vtedy je dobré, keď zaprší, aby sa tá zem ochladila.
After the Dožinky celebration comes another gathering or sort of another ritual, usually at the beginning of August, and it's called the Perun's Day. And this day or days are linked to a god Perun, the Slavic god of thunder, and also the god who presides over the world of the living. So although we have the connection to him, it's actually a joint occasion during which not just Perun, but also his girlfriend or partner, Dodola, that also carries many different names across Slavic cultures, is evoked so as to kind of carry or convey the wishes and the pleas and the prayers of the people to her partner Perun. Why? Because once the grains were harvested and the fields were left barren and the sun was shining on them, it really removed the moisture, really parched the barren fields. And our ancestors knew that this was a good time for rain to come, to kind of moisturize it and prepare it, which is something that we didn't have enough of this year, for instance. So Dodola, the goddess of good luck, was to transmit this prayer for rain to Perun, who would then send it down onto the earth to cool the fields that were just harvested.
A znovu sa vrátime ešte trošku k žatve. Počas žatvy medzi niektoré rituály patrilo, že na poli sa nezožalo úplne všetko, ale nechal sa tam jeden snop obilia. To sa volalo Weleslova brada. Často z tých posledných snopov sa viazali či už obradné vence, alebo sa viazala práve taká slamená bábka, ktorá práve potom predstavovala tú dodolu. Obliekla sa tak podobne ako morena, len morena bola do bielých šiat a táto bábka slamená bola oblečená do červených šiat a to spomenula.
We will backtrack just a little bit to go back to the harvest. Usually, or it was a custom that not everything was harvested of the field. So one stack of hay or grains would be left there, and this would then be used to weave wreaths or to make a special sort of effigy that was clothed in red dress and that represented this deity of good luck, Dodola, and that was used during the celebrations of Perun days.
No, skrátili ste to pekne. Dobre, čiže vlastne máme nejakú bábku v červených šatách, ktorá predstavuje Dodoliu. Znovu s touto bábkou počas Perunových dní sa obchádzajú polia a žiada sa o vlahu, aby zem bola za prvé ochladená, ale za druhé vieme, že v tento čas je dobrá vlaha aj preto, aby všetko dozrelo. Či už jablka, hrušky, ovocie, zelenina, ale aj zelenina v pôde. Keď dostane teraz znovu vlahu, po horúcom lete, dostane vlahu, tak ona ešte naberie a dorastie a dozrie.
So we have this effigy dressed in red that represents Dodolia. People would form processions, and the effigy would be carried around the fields so as to bless those fields with rain, to cool the earth after the harvest, but also to give it enough moisture so that everything that was yet to be harvested, the fruit, the vegetables, so that that could ripen properly.
Vlastne počas toho Perunového sviatku sa ešte ten sviatok trošku ešte tak rozšíril o zývanie jeho troch synov, často o jeho troch synov, ktorí predstavovali, a to bola taká ako keby poklona tomu Perunovi, zároveň tomu Perunovi, že si ľudia uvedomovali aj to, že je potrebná nielen múdrosť, nielen sila, ale akási aj taká ladnosť, taká krása, čo sú traja synovia, múdrosť, sila a krása.
A part of the Perun Day festivities was also celebrating and evoking Perun's three sons that represented wisdom, strength, and beauty.
No a v rámci toho sviatku práve kvôli týmto trom synom sa konali rôzne súťaže, a to nie len v boji, v sile, ale taktiež v rôznych šachom dáme podobných stolových hrách, ale aj v práve, povedzme, že súťaže v tanci, v speve, vlastne v tom umení, v tej kráse.
And to honor these three sons, various competitions were held. It was not just about showcasing one's physical strength, so there would be combat and wrestling and whatnot, to engage sort of that aspect of masculinity, but there would also be competitions in games that were all linked to the intellect and kind of the ability of one to think creatively and fast. And there would be also competitions in dancing and singing to represent that beauty aspect.
A vlastne tento Perunov deň v rámci kresťanstva potom prešiel skôr na deň svätého Eliáša. A po tomto Perunovi zasvetenom dni sú tam také dve ďalšie mená v kalendári, a to je Jakub a Anna, ktorí práve v tom predkresťanskom období boli božstvami Boreboga a Odagi, čiže časť Boga a Perin Babi. Kým vy preložíte, ja skúsim pribehnúť ešte s tým obradným vencom, aby ľudia videli, že ako to vyzerá.
Perun days after the arrival of Christianity were transformed and like merged with the feast day of Saint Elias. And after this feast day comes the feast day of Saint Jacob and Anna, that before Christianity arrived were represented by the god and goddess of weather. And these again, they were critical to our ancestors at this time of year when something was already harvested, but not everything was in yet. So they needed to also plead and engage with those deities.
OK. Doniesol som ukázať aj taký náš venček. Taký maličký síce, ale náš, kde je vlastne obilie. No niekde hore. Je aj obilie. Tu na vzadu. Hej.
So what you can see here is Weleslav's harvest wreath that was once part of the Dožinky harvest celebrations, and that is still part of the Slovak culture and folklore today.
Pravda, že mohol byť ozdobený tak ako ten náš nejakými kvetmi, sušenými kvetmi a tak ďalej. Ale podstata toho venca je aj v tom, že on sa potom, keďže on je svätý, ten venec je posvätený, je svätý, tak vlastne tie zbytky toho obilia, ktoré tam sú ad jedna pridávané do žrádla pre dobytok zime, aby mali tú silu. Skúste preložiť.
So this wreath was not just a pretty decoration, it was considered sacred, it was sanctified. It contained, as Weleslaw was showing you, the grains that were harvested, but it could also be decorated with flowers. And because it was sacred, after the celebrations, it would not just be discarded. So the grains that are contained within the wreath would be stored, would be saved, and this would either be used to feed animals, to feed the livestock.
A v neposlednej rade práve z tohto venca to obilie bolo pridané do osiva, ktoré sa potom na jar, tým, že sa z venca zobralo do osiva, to osivo sa vlastne požehnalo a potom rozosievali, aby nové vyrástli.
And a part of that harvest wreath, part of the grains that it consists of, would be kept and added to the seeds that were sown the following sowing season, so in the spring. And again, these grains, the seeds would be blessed. They would be invigorated with the power of this special wreath. And that was to kind of, again, sort of inviting the good harvest, prosperity. There it is.
Môj venček je takto maličký, ale tie vence bývali veľké, skoro ako človek, kľudne, hej?
So this particular wreath that Weleslaw has is a small variant of the harvest Dožinky wreath, but they could be as big as a human, and you can see the picture that you see on the screen now gives you an idea.
Dobre, A vlastne práve toto obdobie...
Sorry.
There was some question.
Môžeme.
Dobre.
No.
Čiže vlastne po tomto období Anny a Jakuba, kedy zreteľne sa mení počasie, a preto je to práve zasvetené bohyni počasia a bohovi času, toto obdobie, nastupuje práve to babie leto, o ktorom sme sa začali baviť na začiatku.
And after this, so once Dožinky are over, once the Parents' Day, or later on the feast days of Saint Anna and Saint Jacob are over, that marks a turning point in weather too. And it really is the beginning of the Indian summer, or babie leto, as we call it in Slovak.
A to babie leto sa u nás volá preto babie. Ľudia si často myslia, že to je preto, lebo babičky sedia na priedomi a vyhrievajú sa. Pravda je však, má o mnoho hlbšie korene.
So babie leto, or old ladies summer, it was some people think that this was named after kind of ladies basking in the late summer and early fall sunshine, so hence the babi, the ladies, the women, hence babie leto. But the true sort of meaning of the term is much more deep and significant.
Lebo vlastne ten názov babieho leta je spojený s bytosťami, ktoré voláme v rámci predkresťanskej viery ako rožanice. Môžeme to trošku parafrazovať so súdičkami, ale nie je to úplne to isté, ale povedzme, že súdičky.
So the term babie leto is linked to these deities, these beings that in the pre-Christian faith were called rožanice. So they are similar to the free faiths as we know them from fairy tales and as they're represented on the picture that you see on the screen, but it's not a perfect match.
Totižto slovanské súdičky, 3 súdičky, nie sú len súdičkami. Prvou súdičkou je totiž samotná bohyňa Mokoš, bohyňa zeme. Ďalšie dve z jej hlavných pomocníc je už spomínaná Dodolia, čiže šťastie a nešťastie. Ale
so these three ladies, rožanice, so they're not just the free faiths. One of the rožanice team was goddess Mokoš herself, and she was assisted by also already mentioned Dodola or Dodolia, the lady luck, the spirit of good luck, but also by another lady that was as a symbol of ill luck or bad luck. He just disappeared on us. So these three were more than just, the weaving, the destiny. There are more layers to the meaning and the purpose and the significance of the Slavic rožanice.
OK. O rožaniciach sa môžete viac dozvedieť práve na facebookovej stránke slovanské rituály, ale aby som dokončil vetu, to ale je tam preto, lebo tých rožaníc okrem 3 mohlo ich byť násobne viac, tam sa mohli pridávať rôzne iné božstvá, ktoré mali čo povedať k osudu. A tam medzi rožanice môžeme zaradiť ako bohyňu ľadu, morenú, živú, mnoho bohyň slovanských mohli sa stať ako keby súdičkami. Preto v rozprávkach často nestretáme len 3 súdičky, ale môže ich byť až 12, 13.
So although in the Western world and culture we're more familiar with those 3 fates, the 3 ladies, in the Slavic tradition it could be more than 3, and often it was more than 3 as different deities assumed that role. And these were all the deities that had something to say or add about fate. So it could be goddess Morena, the goddess of winter and death and transformation. It could be Lada, goddess of white, goddess of life, goddess of women. So that's why also in Slavic fairy tales and in Slovak fairy tales we encounter often more than the 3 fates.
O rožanicami začneme vlastne posledný webinár budúci, ktorý sa bude práve začínať práve rožanicami a skrz sviatky predkov vlastne ukončíme, lebo tam niekde sme aj pred rokom, skoro pred rokom začali celý tento cyklus a vlastne ukončíme to práve sviatkom predkov, sviatkom smrti a vlastne ukončením celého toho stočiaceho sa kolesa.
A ešte prosím ťa povedz, že ako to babie leto súvisí s rožanicami?
No, oni sú tie baby.
Oni sú tie baby. So the babie leto, the old ladies' summer, these ladies are those rožanice, these fates, these deities. So this is their time of year, the Indian summer.
A keďže vlastne je to práve čas, kedy tá mokoš nám dáva úrodu, kedy sa k nej najviac modlí, kedy vlastne ľudia rozímajú práve nad tým kolesom osudu, ako sa točí, že treba že už myslia na to, že treba zasiať, ale ešte treba niečo zožať. Hej? Tam je práve ten cyklus tej viery, toho, že či bude mať šťastie, či bude mať nešťastie. Hej? Je tam tá duchovná, je to čas, kedy sme duchovne, alebo v tej dobe ľudia boli úzko spätí s osudom, hej? S časom súdičiek, s časom šťastia, nešťastia a bohyne mokoše. Čiže 3 rožaníc, 3 babičiek, 3, hoci niekedy tá šťastená vyzerala ako krásna mladá dievča, ale v zásade to boli 3 baby a práve preto babie leto, lebo vtedy, keď oni tie baby prišli 3, tak všetko žiarilo a bolo krásne počasie, ale keď si povedali, že na to kašľú, tak nemuselo byť to počasie až také pekné.
So at this time of year, you can beautifully see the ever-turning cycle of life and death. So people were harvesting or just harvested the produce of their labor, but they were already thinking of the harvest to come. So this was a time of contemplation and connection to the concept of faith and good luck that are represented by rožanice. This was a time of connection to goddess Mokosh, the goddess of the earth. People were pondering the harvest that's behind them, but they were already wondering about the one that is ahead, the one that will come next year. So henceforth, they kind of dedicated this time of year, and they had much respect for these deities that were connected to fate, destiny.
Zlepšujem sa, fakt sme tu stihli za 45 minút celú prednášku.
Sme na konci.
Amazing. Woo, good time.
So just to say this a little inside joke, if you have been with us since the beginning of the webinars that we started running with Weleslaw, you know that the first few we were hitting a 3-hour mark almost. So we are getting better. We covered it within 45 minutes. But just before I open it for Q&A, I would like to just close the season that we covered now. So the Babie Leto or Indian summer ends is connected to this fate, destiny, Rožanice, and we are transferring or moving towards the time of year that we contemplate our ancestors more, we contemplate death more. So what comes after this are the celebrations, the festivities and rituals that are dedicated to ancestors. And that's where we actually started last year with Weleslaw when we're talking about All Saints and All Souls Day. If you would like to know more about Rožanice, you can read about them on the Facebook site, Slavic Rituals. Peter or Weleslaw just posted a beautiful post about them there, so head there. And I'll thank Weleslaw for his the usual wonderful work, and now open it up for Q&A if you have any.
A je veľmi dobré to takto skrátiť, zistujem, lebo v podstate máme trošku viacej času na otázky a vlastne takú rozpravu, kde tí ľudia môžu získať ešte o mnoho viac ako nejaká prednáška, ale môžu sa spýtať to, čo ich zaujíma, čo chcú presne vedieť a majú práve teraz príležitosť.
Okay, so it's wonderful that we managed to do it within 45 minutes. So and now comes perhaps the most important part, which is your question. So there is something that you are interested in, something you would like to know more about. Don't be shy, ask away. And here on this screen, you see the 3 books published by Weleslaw so far. On that. So, any questions? Do we have anything on the chat?
We do. We had a great question here earlier about what were the 3 fates again? So it was good luck, bad luck, and
Mokoš.
Mokoš.
Mokoš. Goddess of earth, but also goddess of fate, because Mokoš most of time showing of her, it's not only as a goddess who has kind of food bowl with grain or whatever, but also with neviem, ako sa to povie po anglicky. No. Zabudol som. Je to, a neviem ani po slovensky poriadne, je to vreteno.
The thread of life.
Alebo s kolovrátkom je zobrazovaná. To je to, čo sa...
So, yeah, so she is depicted with with the equipment around it. So I believe that's the spindle. So she would be depicted with food, and the spindle too as a symbol of her activity weaving people's destinies and lives.
Yes, because Mokoš wasn't only goddess of earth, but also goddess of fate, because our ancestors believe that she is goddess who make line of life, and another goddess make it long, and some of them cut it, and from that we have this kind of long life. And also it's kind of believed that on the earth, goddess of Mokoš, she make robí látku, tká.
Mm-hmm.
Vlastne tie všetky vlákna, ktoré pletie, tak vlastne potom dáva ako keby do nejakej tapisérie, ktorá ukazuje, ako sa ten svet vyvíja.
Oh, nice.
Ako keby filmový pás dnešnej predstavení. Že ona tká vlákna.
Do you want to translate, Gabby, since he
Sure.
froze?
Yeah. Zmrzli ste nám, takže budem preložím to, dobre? So Mokosh, she makes those threads of life, of individual lives of all of us, but then she brings it together and weaves it into the tapestry that reflects the life, the situation, the development on the earth. So it's kind of this tapestry, this fabric is like a film strip of what's going on.
Made up of all our individual lives and fates as they're unraveling, short or long.
So question was, who was third? No. Question is, who was first? Because Mokosh is first of Rožanice, not third. Because it's first.
The high goddess, yeah.
High goddess is Mokosh, and two helpers, unluck and luck. Dolia and nedolia. Šťastie a nešťastie.
So yeah, so she's the main goddess, and then she has those two helpers, good luck and bad luck.
Yep.
The three Rožanice, the three fates.
Yeah.
All right.
So metaphorical, but also so visual, the old belief system. Very nice, Richard. What are you sharing? You're muted. Richard, you have to unmute yourself.
Sure. Okay, I am from Canada. We left Slovakia. Ja znam po slovenski, ale nie dobrze. We left Slovakia, Carpathian Mountains, a stroke of 150 years ago. So my grandparents used to make snowpick at this time. Christmas time, a whole bunch of straw was put under the tablecloth, and underneath the table, everybody would kneel down and pray for anybody who had died in our ancestry in Slovakia and Canada. Is that still part of this festival?
Yeah, this what you're showing is kind of what I said in our webinar is Weleslaw, this last piece of grain on the field, which been cut it on the end, on the very end, and call it Weleslaw beard. And because Veles is also god of underworld, for this reason your family pray with when someone died. For this reason they pray to this piece of grain, because this piece what you hold it in hands is a symbol of god of underworld. Understand?
Thank you very much. And this grain comes from old Ukraine and Russia. It is extremely old grain because it's got multi-heads, so it is medieval grain. We've been growing it every year as a remembrance.
Wow. Nice.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you, Richard. So we have another question in the chat, but I would actually love for Cheryl, who asked it, if she could come on. You don't have to turn the video on. I just don't quite understand your question, so maybe you could explain it better.
Hi. We're making clothes for the winter for celebrations, so there would have to be weaving of some kind. And also for preparing for working in the fields again the following spring. So are they stretching hides and doing other types of things too during this process of harvesting, or is it through the winter? So they're prepping for other celebrations and those beautiful costumes that they make and gear. That comes from cotton and weaving, correct? So there's weaving through the winter, or is it done now?
Takže, so I'll just make one correction. So we wouldn't have cotton. We would have other types of fabrics. Cotton is not grown in Slovakia. A pani sa pýtala, že či v tomto období sa aj vlastne spracovávajú lán, konope a tak do tých látok. Že či sa aj prádie, alebo že či to je až potom neskôr v zime?
No, zožaté boli, hej. Podobne ako z poľa boli zožaté a zvyčajne sa teraz sušili. A ten proces spracovávania nastával následne. Ale v prvom rade bolo zabezpečiť jedlo. A keď sme mali už všetko pod strechou, mrkvu a nielen obilie, ale už všetko. Jednoducho, ja sám mám okolo domu sad, hej, a mám nejaké polička a viem, že nemal by som teraz reálne, aj keby som ľan alebo konope zožal, tak reálne by som nemal čas ho spracovávať. Čiže ono sa niekde odložilo do stodoly, nechalo sa ho zvyčajne vyschnúť a až vyslovene, až v podstate som ho začal spracovávať. A potom tam už išli kroky, lebo ten ľan má, to je nadlho.
Dobre, tam nepôjdeme.
No,
preložím to
on
teraz.
má veľa krokov, ktoré treba vykonať a počas tej jesene, babieho leta, tam nie je na to čas. To sa odložilo až nakoniec, keď to bude možné. Čiže neskorá jeseň, prípadne zima. Potom prádenie a všetky tieto činnosti.
So, in a nutshell, there was no time for that during Indian summer. So now, because the priority of the people was first to take care for the food. So the food that was to keep the family alive during that harsh winter that was coming, that first had to be in. Not just the grains, but also the fruits and the vegetables. And while you're doing this, or you're processing it, you don't have time to weave. So the linen, hemp would be harvested at this time of year, but it would be put aside somewhere dry to dry it, and then it would be processed when all of the harvest is in, when food has been taken care of, and the weaving and the cloth making would come later on.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Cheryl. All right.
We have another question here. It's from Sam. Sam, are you here with us? So you're asking, when are the grains planted?
Yes, I grew up in the prairie of Illinois, and sometimes we planted some of the grains in the fall, right before winter, so we could harvest them early, and we planted others in the springtime that would be harvested later. And I was trying to get how that impacted the festivals. If they were planted in the fall, was there a festival for that? If they were planted if they're planted in the spring, I would think the harvest would be later than what I was hearing. So I just wanted some clarification.
Takže ten pán sa pýta, že kedy sa sadilo, teraz sialo obilie, že tam, odkiaľ on pochádza, sa niečo seje na jar, ale niečo sa seje aj na jeseň. A vlastne to je hneď tá prvá úroda, že či toto nejako ovplyvnilo.
Ale to, čo sa seje na jeseň, to sú oziminy, to je isté druhy obilia, ktoré sa sejú na jeseň, aby oni podrástli do istej výšky, ale oni sa žnú aj tak až v jeseni. Čiže tam nie je to, že sa na jar skosia. Nie, oni len potrebujú dlhší ako keby nábeh a to sa volá, obilovín sa delí medzi, obchodoval som s tým, na jariny a oziminy. Oziminy sa už vlastne sadia v jeseni, ale to nemá s obradmi v zásade nič ako to je len proces znovu. Niečo sa nemusí sadiť. Aj cesnak sa mi zdá, že sa sadí v jeseni už. Hej? Aby na jar už nabehol a už rástol.
So Weleslaw was saying that certain grains are planted earlier, but that doesn't mean that they're harvested in spring. They're actually harvested in early autumn, just like the rest of the grains. They just need a longer time of incubation in the earth. Does that answer your question?
So that doesn't really affect the harvest or nature of the harvest celebrations, festivities, rituals.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Part 2.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Okay.
Richard, go ahead.
Quick question. My mother worked the field with her family and raised potatoes. I haven't heard you talk about that. And it was a curious way of sharing the harvest because the landowner would come after the harvest and select the baskets that had been harvested. He would get half and the family would get half. Can you comment on that, please?
Yeah, so Weleslaw will comment on that, but just to add a little bit. So the potato didn't come until the reign of Empress Maria Theresa, who actually brought the potato over once the Americas were discovered by Christopher Columbus. So that was introduced in the 1700s. That's why Weleslaw didn't talk about the potato, because he's referring to a more ancient past, which is the past of our predecessors, when the ancient Slavs still practiced their spiritual belief system before even the arrival of Christianity in the 9th century.
Yes. This is for me absolutely 100% answer. There is nothing to say more, but as you know me, I believe that faith have to be life and have to, if we would like to keep it, our faith have to continue and to get inside also potatoes. And thing is that even think about potatoes is changing. Even I change it myself, because mainly we did it that on spring we put it a potato in, and in 1st September we took it out, and it's actually time when harvest and all this what we've been talking about is happening. But I find out myself that I put it in the ground potatoes 3 weeks earlier, and first time I take him out, I make a harvest of potato not in September but in August, and in August put it in again, and I have new potatoes still in my garden, and in 1-2 weeks I will have it harvested. But still doesn't mean that all tradition of Dożynki will change it, because the celebration of Dożynki is celebration for grain, for bread, for wheat, for this kind of food. And what we mentioned before, we had on the end, wasn't me, on end of autumn, we have celebration Hodi, which is closing time for all of it, even potato.
A ešte sa ten pán pýtal, že jeho rodina, čo sa zobralo z polí, tá úroda, oni si to aj rozdielovali medzi sebou ako rodina, že to vlastne sa o to delili. Či by si o tom vedeli?
Nie. Oni sa nedelili. Oni dostali 50% and the landlord got the other 50%.
Oh.
That's what he was. Yeah. So the feudal times.
Nemám connection.
Yeah, it's okay. It's been answered.
Áno?
Ano. Okay, let's take.
Anna,
Yes, Richard. So you're asking a
Yes.
question from a different time frame.
yes, understand.
Okay, let's go for the last question of the evening. So here's, obviously this got quite a bit of interest. So yes, the landlords, when it was feudalism before serfdom was abolished in 1848, the serfs would work and they would have to give a percentage of what they harvested to the owner of the estate. And Richard, you said that it was 50%, which is a very high number, but here we see that the percentages ranged. John mentioned that 1/10 of the harvest went to the landlord and 1/9 of it went to the church.
Mhm.
Helen here mentioned that the percentages changed. Exactly, we had no cotton in this region. It was mostly flax, hemp, and wool.
And we're
It was a
also
very-
talking about like a huge time frame, you know, not 10 years. So we're talking 100 years here. So these practices changed with time. So we can really answer that in a simple way.
I can see in the chat a quite nice question if
Sure.
people have dressed in the same time, in the same dress in the festival. Do people wear different dress for each festival or the same dress for all festivals? This question is quite nice, but we have to think this way, that people times hundreds of years ago, if they had 2 clothes, was quite enough. Yeah, one clothes for work and one trousers, second trousers for festival. So basically they had the same dress all year nearly, and maybe they had kind of different of course could be some differences in past year through year, that if I'm going to celebrate Vajano, I'm going with shirt with a short rukav.
Short sleeve.
Yeah, and if I'm going to Koryada, then I have kind of kožuch.
Fur coat.
Yeah, it's easy like that. So basically, dress doesn't reflect it festival, but reflected time of year.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I just ordered this, it's an ethnographic book about Ukrainian diaspora in Canada, doing a practice of pouring beeswax into water for divination and like other purposes. I was wondering if this was a Slovak practice as well.
So if I can, we'll give it to Weleslaw, if I can step in. So we have a similar thing, but not during the harvest time, not at this time of year, but then later during Advent, and it's pouring of the lead traditionally into water through a keyhole, and it was usually done by girls, young girls and women, and they would gather together to do this so as to tell the future from the shape that hot lead took in the cold water. Ale Weleslaw, pani sa pýtala, že čítala teraz v knihe, že ukrajinská praktika, že liali vosk do vody.
Do jazier, alebo do
vody.
Je to len jedna z praktik veštenia. Nemuselo to byť do jazera, mohlo to byť do misky s vodou, nemuselo to byť vosk, mohlo to byť olovo, niečo, čo pri chladnutí, pri rýchlom schladnutí dostane nejaký tvar a ten tvar môže vyjadrovať niečo v ňom môžeme vidieť. Áno, je to čarodejná praktika.
Ale či sa to konkrétne robilo na Slovensku s včelím voskom?
Mohlo sa.
Mohlo sa.
Práve.
OK.
Je to klasická čarodejná technika, pri ktorej je jedno, čo použijeme. Používame to, čo máme. Ak máme vosk, tak máme vosk. Ak máme olovo, lejeme olovo. Jednoducho potrebujeme len materiál, ktorý pri rýchlom ochladení rýchlo stúpi. To je celé.
Okay. So just to answer that question, so Weleslaw answers that it could have also, this practice could have been used with beeswax in Slovakia, but in general, it's just a divination practice that people use whatever kind of material, lead, beeswax, in the Arabic world, coffee, that cools quickly when it comes into contact with water and leaves some kind of imprint, and then that is used for divination purposes. So it comes from, yeah, the magical system of spirituality.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and we'll close it on that. So, but just before we sign off, just a few things. So we have another webinar coming up in the middle of October. We will be announcing it soon on a very different topic. We'll be exploring Czechoslovak identity and how it was formed and how one particular family played a very important role in the process. So look out for that. There will be a fascinating webinar with a wonderful guest that will take place on October the 16th. Also, if you'd like to explore Slovakia, Slovak culture, these age-old practices, these two programs are there for you to take a look at and to get the advantage of the discount on today with the code October, so you can get 20% off both of these courses that will guide you into the practices that were carried out hundreds of centuries ago, but not just as a fragment of a past that's done and dusted, but as something that still lives on in the Slovak culture and folklore in one way or another. So those two courses are perfect for that. You will receive email with all the links and contact at Weleslaw after the webinar, and the replay tomorrow, so within 24 hours. And I would like to just thank Weleslaw again for joining us despite his babysitting duties. So we very much appreciate that you made time for it and that you managed to expertly, merge the two activities together. So thank you. Thank you all for joining us.
Wonderful timekeeping today, so thank you. We're getting better.
Okay.
It's because he's busy, he has those 3 children, doesn't have time to talk for 2 hours.
So yes, and so that we'll close that off. So happy beginning of fall, and see you guys in 2 weeks' time. Thank you once again for joining us, and have a wonderful day ahead. If you're joining from Slovakia, have a wonderful evening.
And one more thing, one more time. Any question if you have about religion or religion of Slavs, you are more than welcome in our Facebook website, Slavics Rituals.
Rituals.
Yeah.
So many wonderful resources for you to use. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful Sunday. Enjoy the season, and we'll see you soon.
Dovidenia.
Ďakujem. Dovidenia.
Ďakujeme. Bye, Al.
Bye,
Bye,
Al.
Zana. Bye, Gabi.
A my sa kedy vidíme? Alebo kedy robíme? Napíšeme sa.
Napíšeme.